Welcome everyone. It is my pleasure to have you all here with us today. Thank you for joining for this webinar in where we will discuss about building a strong BC program with ISO 22301. My name is ITILV, the Portfolio Marketing Manager for Continuity Resilience and Service Management. The presenter of this webinar will be Ms. Winifred Dela Setor Smith. She is a business risk and governance professional with over 15 years experience in information technology, business continuity, and enterprise risk management in telecom sector. As usual, at the end of this presentation, we have question and answer session, and we would love to hear from you. Therefore, I highly encourage you to submit any question or comment you may have during this webinar in the chat box of your control panel. Winifred will answer to all your questions accordingly at the end of this presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you will get insightful information from this webinar. Please, Winifred, you may start the presentation.
Thank you, Erita. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. As Erita has already said, we will discuss building a strong business continuity program with ISO 22301. So I'll just straight away go ahead with the presentation. So this webinar will be in three parts. We will first talk about initiating a business continuity program with ISO standard, and we will make some references to other standards and guidelines as we go along, giving a view of how to build a strong business continuity program. The second part will be identifying and building your critical success factors for the business continuity program. And the third part will focus on how to ensure the sustainability and continuous improvement of the business continuity program. So before we go ahead, I just want us to look at a few things on building the business case for management. Most often, executives will say that it won't happen to us. We will cope. We always do. We're too big to fail. And we operate in volatile markets for a while now, and nothing has happened. These are frequent responses from top management. Others believe that the insurance companies will take up and pay. But what happens to the reputation of the company? Most think that they haven't got the time to prepare for something that will never happen. So these are some of the things that our executives, say. Unfortunately, the global landscape is moving very fast, and who would have thought that cyber threats will evolve so fast? Natural disasters, trends are changing and becoming major concern for organizations. Man-made disasters are also impacting institutions across the globe. And so as business continuity professionals, we need to be able to make a good business case for top management, because the critical success factor for business continuity program is the ownership of the program by top management and at the appropriate levels. So let's go and make that business case. So let's go on to the first part of our presentation. I just want us to zoom down on two definitions from ISO so we can have clarity. First of all, we all understand that business continuity management is a holistic management process that's supposed to identify potential threats to the organization and the impact to the business operations that those threats, if they are realized, might cause, and which provides a framework for building organizational resilience with the capability of an effective response to safeguard the interest of key stakeholders. So we all understand that as business continuity professionals. Now, if we talk about the business continuity management system as ISO has defined it, is the part of the overall management system that establishes, implements, operates, and monitors, reviews, and maintains and continuously improves the business continuity. Okay, and when we talk about the program is basically an ongoing management and governance process supported by top management and appropriately resourced to implement and maintain business continuity management. So that's said and done. We have clarity on these two definitions. Now, for us to be able to build a strong business continuity program, there are key components that we need to focus on: the policy, For the business continuity policies, the people would define responsibilities, management processes. We look at the policy and implementation of the planning, the implementation of the business continuity, the operations, performance assessment, and management review, and the improvement process. And then we also need to focus on documentation, providing the auditable evidence so that if anybody comes in, we can show what we have done. And as well, any business continuity management process that is relevant to the organization. Okay. So now, in building the business continuity management system, all ISO management also aligned to the PDCA. The PDCA is basically the plan, do, and check and act model that is aligned to a lot of the ISO standards. So basically where we do the planning to make sure that we establish the business continuity policy and the objectives, the targets, what are the controls, the processes, the procedures that are relevant to improving the business continuity in order to deliver the results that's aligned with the organization's overall strategy and objective. And then when we go to the do basically speaks to the implement and operate. So it speaks to implementing the business continuity policy, what the policy says, we need to make sure that's implemented, what the controls we have identified, we need to find a way to implement it, the processes and the procedures. And then when we come to the check basically does the monitor and review. So we need to continuously monitor and review the performance against the business continuity policy and then the objectives that we've set for the business continuity program. And in the act stage, is basically how do we maintain and improve the business continuity program? Okay, how do we ensure that we are taking corrective measures as they come along? So this model is very, very good. We'll go along the next slides to punch on some of the critical areas that we can focus on as we run along with the PDCA for the business continuity management system. So for the plan stage, there are 8 critical areas that we need to look at. We need to first initiate the business continuity management system. And initiating that, we need to define the approach that we want to use. What is the approach that your institution would want to use? Would you want to go along with interviews of the areas that you would be defining as part of the scope? Would you want to go along with questionnaires that you need to design? Or you want to do a combination of both? And as well, you need to also select your methodology and frameworks. Do you already have a risk management framework that is running? Because when you're going on the understanding the organization, that will come in handy. Do you have a policy, a risk management policy? Are there other policies that can feed back into the BCMS? And as well to align with best practices as you go along initiating the BCMS. And on the point B, understanding the organization, your organization, you need to also understand the mission, objectives, values, and the strategy of the organization, because that will be very important as you go along in doing your analysis. The external environment, what are the regulatory environments and laws that speak to that organization and your business. You need to know them so that you could work clearly when you're doing your analysis. And on the analysis and analysis of the existing management system, you need to do an information gathering. You want to understand as a business, do we already have a management system that's ongoing? If you have information, ISMS already ongoing, that's Information Security Management System, and then you need to have some kind of information on it. You would want to do a gap analysis to understand where you are at as a business and where you want to go. And as well, you need to also look at your organizational boundaries. When you're looking at the scope, there are 3 critical areas that you need to zoom down on. Your organizational boundaries. Remember, you need to create a scope for the BCMS program. You need to understand what are the organizational boundaries that we want to cover. So as in your organization, what are the businesses that your organization does? Do you want to take the whole, all the areas of the businesses that organization does? You need to also define that. You need to also define the information system boundaries. So are you going to look at all the hardware, the platforms that you have? Are you going to look at your cloud systems? All those things have to be well defined. And then you zoom down on the physical boundaries. Where are the locations that your organization exists? You need to look at the regional locations and scope and such. Now, the other key point is the leadership approval on the BCMS project, which is very critical. And here's where we have to now build a business case for management. Now, we need to build a business case that management sees the importance of starting a business continuity program. If they don't see the importance of starting the business continuity program, it becomes a challenge to actually implement it. The business continuity project team as well must be identified together with the help of management. This is very critical that management does the identification and empowers the resource, the team, the project team, to go along with the business continuity program. The resource requirements, okay, that's also very critical, and as well the project plan, and then the management approval. In the project plan, most of the time you will not be able to have a full budget identified in the project plan, because that's key. But you need to be able to have an idea of what budget is necessary for management to approve. Because as you go along, you might want to also have some kind of standing assurance that there will be budget available to implement the critical areas that have been identified. And on the next point, on the business continuity policy, which is also very important, you also need to look at the policy drafting process. Who are those going to be the stakeholders that are going to be involved in drafting that policy? It's very, very critical. The management approval, after it's done, who are those going to approve that policy so that it becomes a working document within the organization. And once you have a policy in place, it's very critical that the internal resources and whoever is a stakeholder to the business understands what the policy says. So therefore, we need to publish that policy, and as well train and communicate and have constant awareness on that policy. We move on to the business impact analysis. We move on to the organizational structure. So for the organizational structure, you also want to look at what makes up your business continuity team. You want to look at who are those, how are you going to form a steerco, how is it going to feed back into the organization, and that has to be clearly also stated out. Now we go on to the document management. The document management is also key. All the documents that has been documented, how do we ensure that the sustainability, there's constant update, reviews to that document so that we can always have it up to date. And then the competence and awareness of the team, it's very critical. We need to plan for that. What are the competencies that we need as a business to be able to implement the BCMS? So that's for the planned stage. Now we move on to the do. Now this is where we actually do the work, and we also focus on 7 other areas. We look at the business impact analysis, which is very critical. On the business impact analysis stage, we want to be able to identify those critical processes and activities on the different stages. We want to be able to identify those key resources and dependencies across the different areas which are within the boundaries. We also want to look at the recovery time objectives of those critical processes. and the recovery point objectives. Now, don't forget that in doing the business impact analysis, it's very critical that we also look at those policies and procedures that are critical to the organization. The relevant laws will come in handy here, and what the regulator says that you must comply with is very critical in doing the business impact analysis. Now, on the do stage, whilst we're doing the business impact analysis, it's very critical that we also assess the risks that impact the business at this point in time. So we need to identify and analyze those risks and then evaluate those risks and with the relevant ISO standards that we have. So basically, at this point, it's very critical that if your organization does not have a risk management policy, you might want to use the ISO 31000, which is also very much aligned with the PDCA. Now we move on to the business continuity strategy. Now the business continuity strategy, you would want to look at what model you want to use. Now remember that you've gone from understanding your organization, you know exactly what your organization does, you've gone to identifying, you've gone to do the business impact analysis and have identified all those critical areas. Now there's no better people to help put in place that business continuity strategy. It's the business and your key stakeholders that were part of that analysis process. So you do the strategy analysis, you look at the selection, what are the business continuity selection that you want to have, the evaluation of capabilities of supplies, and basically you'll be able to document your business continuity strategy. And then we also look at the protection and mitigation measures. So basically the protection and mitigation measures is you want to look at how do we prevent, what are the preventative measures that we have as part of the organization, and what are the detective measures that we have, and how do we make sure that those, when we do, how do we correct them? It's very, very key. Now the business continuity plans and the procedures are very critical. Well, as we have done the business impact analysis, we've identified all those critical areas. We've identified what the the RTOs are. We've identified what our dependencies are and the risks. We put together that business continuity plan. So the plan basically will highlight what the recovery time objective is for a particular unit or a particular product and service, and that will be well documented so that will come in handy when there's any eventuality. Now, what's key is the communication plan. The communication plan basically feeds back into the crisis communication plan. You need to have a clear understanding of who is going to be communicating a problem when there's a crisis in the business, and who are the incident management team, how is it going to feed back, how is it going to be communicated internally and externally, how are we going to ensure that we are documenting those critical scenarios and scripts to be able to act proactively when there's an eventuality. And one key thing as well is the exercising and testing of the plans. There are many ways to do that. There are a number of ways. You could have a desktop review of those plans that have been set. You pull together the teams and you discuss what you have documented as your business continuity plan. And you sort of enact some kind of scenarios that you know are critical, and you go along. Most of the time in the exercising, you could do a desktop simulation or first level reviews with the teams. On the testing one, you may want to test your systems. For instance, if you have certain redundancies, you may want to test them to see if really they could recover, and so that you test yourself against the RTOs that you have identified to make sure that you are able to recover within the time frames that you have designed for yourself. Let's move on to the check stage. So basically the check stage is the monitoring stage. Okay, it's a stage where you monitor your business continuity management process. You want to measure yourself against what the targets that you have initially set for yourself, and also analyze and evaluate and understand where you have reached at the point in time. In the monitoring stage, you would want to also create indicators and maybe create dashboards for management, which is very critical because management has to understand that we move from a certain point, these were our targets, and then this is where we are at the point in time. So they could understand how the business continuity management program is going. And it's also very critical at the check stage that we have some kind of internal audit. We create an internal audit program to check over, the business continuity program against the standard, which is very critical. You may want to designate responsible people to do that, establish independence, objectivity, and impartiality. It's very, very critical. You may want to plan the audit activities, allocate, the resources to those activities so that you perform the activities and then you are able to bring out the non-conformities and then you close them. This one is very critical even when you want to certify for ISO 22301. And now we'll move on to the management review. The management review is very important to give a chance to management and all key stakeholders to probe our business continuity management program. So we need to prepare for the management review. The ISO standard has very defined areas that you need to look at whilst you're doing the management review, and that gives you a clear view on some of the areas that you need to focus on. Now moving on to the non-conformities and corrective actions. With the non-conformities and the corrective actions, you also want to look at the process to resolve all the problems that has been found out by the audit team, as we've said already, and make sure that we improve those non-conformities and action them. And then we finally move on to the continual improvement process, monitoring of the change factors, which is very critical. You want to look at your environment and understand what has changed from when you started the business continuity program. You might have identified certain laws, but at a point in time, the regulators might have brought in certain new laws. You might have had a certain mission and objective from the organization, but at a point in time, these might have changed. It's very critical that there's a clear process on how to make sure that those change factors are incorporated back into the business continuity management program. So now we'll look at the good practice guideline. The thing about the good practice guideline is it aligns very much with the ISO standard, and it gives you a very nice kind of framework, if you like, to be able to put all your the program together. Now it looks at 6 very defined stages. It looks at the policy and program management. You can go on to the ISO 5.3 to understand further what the key areas are. Basically wants the top management to establish the business continuity plan. That's very critical. That the appropriate to the purpose, that the policy is appropriate to the purpose of the organization, that it provides some kind of framework for setting business continuity objectives. So that one is very important. And now these 2 areas, the policy and program management and embedding the business continuity, the good practice guidance is as a management practice. So this has to be internalized with management. Now the 4 other areas which are the good practice guidelines sees as the technical areas is the analysis, the design, the implementation and validation stage. And if you remember when we did the discussion on the plan, do, check and act, the analysis stage basically falls in your do, where you do your business impact analysis. You need to determine what your RTOs are. You need to determine what the RPOs are, what the maximum business continuity objectives for the business is. and then what the maximum tolerable period of disruption will be. That's also very critical. And then you look at your risk and threats analysis. So basically, when you look at the clauses 4.1, the ISO clauses 4.1 and 8.2.3, it gives you very defined areas on how to do that and the things not to miss when you're doing the analysis. And with the risk assessment, as I've said, if your organization already has a policy, you could use that because it's critical that you understand that if you identify risk, how then do we respond to those risks? Are we going to treat them? Is there a risk acceptance process if we're not going to treat them? Are we going to transfer those risks that we've seen? So those are very important. And then as well in the design stage, which fits very well with the business continuity strategy, identifying those appropriate strategies, operational, tactical, and strategic business continuity strategies, where you actually do your documentation of your plans. You actually do the selection of your strategy, and then you can move them into the implementation stage, where you do the implementation on the ground and documentation of the business continuity plans and the disaster recovery plans, including your contingency plans for key contacts, etc., etc. Now, as I've already said, the validation also feeds on to the testing, the exercise and performance, and audits, maturity assessment, and etc. So that takes us to part 2 of the webinar. In part 2 of the webinar, we just want to look at building those critical success factors for top management, the core team, and the organization as a whole. This is very important. As we've already seen in our PDCA, we have the critical success factors is to ensure that we have a clear plan that is understood by all the key stakeholders that's important for the business continuity program. The project chapter has to be very clear. The resources for that project has to be very laid out and agreed upon. And then the costs and budgets, where the budget is going to come from once we have been able to identify those critical areas, also has to be very clear and agreed upon. That's critical success factor 1. And we should be able to measure from where we started to where we are at. Okay. And for the top management support, as I've said, once top management has signed off a policy, then we are happy to go, because then top management wouldn't sign what they don't have confidence in. It's also very important at this point to maybe have a sort of a sponsor, somebody who would be in top management that would also sit in for the business continuity team, or the coordinator, or whoever has been mandated to take upon the business continuity program. That's also very critical. And then on the third point, the appropriate resourcing and project office coordination, or STEERCO. We need to also agree as a business, or you need to, your organization has to agree, how do we want to run along with this business continuity resource? And do we want to have a separate office that's going to run it? Do we want to have it in a STEERCO, or do we want to just, sort of have another kind of structure? That's also part of our critical success factors. And the reporting and escalation process to top management. How do we report what has been done? How do we report where we are at? How do we make sure that we are escalating the things that are not being done when they are supposed to be, back to top management? That's also key. We need to be able to set that right out, because it's critical to the success of the business continuity program. And from my experience, most of the time, the resources that are put together for business continuity must have some kind of key performance indicators. What's not measured is often not really done. So if we can, for all the resources that have been identified, actually give them some kind of key performance indicators to say, look, these are the things that we're expecting of you, and recognition, it's very key, of whatever has been achieved and the milestones that have been achieved. It's also very key. Once we recognize those people that take up upon the business continuity tasks and activities, they would have that they'll feel more, it will be more good for them to continue the business continuity program. And on the second point, the comprehensive communication plan on key milestones and deliverables is also key. We need to, as a business, celebrate what has been achieved and what we've been able to do for the program. And the other critical success factor is a comprehensive regulatory and compliance checklist across management. As I've said, this is very key. In most organizations across the globe that have gone against regulatory requirements and they've been penalized, it's sometimes impacted their business, drastically. And it's important that the executives or the key owners of specific areas understand their regulatory environment. And we may want to push some kind of checklist across the different units that's part of your organizational boundary to understand those very critical areas and reassess on a periodic basis and ensure that they are complying to the regulations and laws of the particular environment you find yourself. And as well, the involvement of the organization is also very key. Every single person must understand how we fit into the business continuity program. Else it's be very difficult when we need to invoke plans and people might not know what they're supposed to do. So far we've done well. We're going on to the third part in focusing on how to ensure sustainability and continuous improvement to the business continuity plan. Now, don't forget that management are not part of the day-to-day activities of the business continuity program, but they have to understand how the program, the different facets of the program. It's very important to maintain a yearly executive top, briefing for top management and leadership to understand what framework we're using as a business on the business continuity management. They need to understand what standards we're using and what the other actions that's required of them means if it's not done. It's very, very, very important. There must be a yearly maintenance of top executive briefing. And as well, the business continuity resources that has been identified across your organization, you must ensure that there's some kind of succession planning for the team and any key resource that's important, because then don't forget that people may move on to other things, and if we do not train people well, they might not be able to fit in and take over the business continuity program. And on an ongoing basis, we need to improve the competence and skills of the team. When the business continuity program started initially, it was the standard that was being used was the BS 25399. Now it's moved on to ISO 22301. We need to constantly upgrade and upskill the team so that they can run with the business continuity and ensure that they are up to the scratch on the requirements of the program. And as well, to maintain a good record of all the documentation. That's very critical, because if you want to build on top of what you have done, or you want to move on to the continuous improvement, you must have the basis of the initial documentation of all the things that you had in place before, and to be able to move on with the, and this is also very key when you want to have an audit for your business continuity program. If the internal auditors come in, they would want to see some kind of documentation of the things that you have put in place for the business continuity program. If the assessors externally come in, they also want to see the same. And as well, it's also very important that we involve the interested parties in our business continuity program. If you are a company that's heavily involved in pulling in third parties into your organization, it's critical that they understand how they fit into your business continuity program. And that's key. The third, interested parties or your regulators, it's critical that they also understand there may be certain things that they will request of the organization. It's also critical that they understand. And all other internal stakeholders that may not be the part of the core business continuity management program. And on the management review meetings, planned at agreed intervals. This one is very key because then in the management review meetings, everybody else will have a chance to probe the program, ask questions, and then we could bring back action the areas where we find that the gaps. And the last bit is basically wanting to maybe certify your organization on the ISO 22301. This one is very critical, especially if you want your customers or your key stakeholders to have confidence in your product and services or whatever business it is that you're doing. It's very important that you move on to some kind of ISO certification, and it gives a good recognition to your company on business continuity. So at this point, we've come to the end of the webinar. I'll hand over to Rita to go through the next slide.
Thank you, Winifred. Thank you, Winifred, for this excellent presentation. Before we proceed with the question and answer session, I would like to inform the attendees that PECB provides training and certification services for ISO 22301, Introduction, Foundation, Lead Implementer, and Lead Auditor. This training is designed to provide you with the required knowledge on how to continue to operate efficiently within a short period. A PECB certificate will demonstrate your dedication in implementing and managing these processes and frameworks, and most importantly, you will be recognized worldwide. For more information, please visit our website, pecb.com/training. Because of the time limitation, we will only read the first question, and the remaining ones will be answered through email by Ms. Winifred. The first question is, have you found a strong culture of resilience within an organization that has aligned to ISO 22301 and has this stretched across their supply chain? Do you have any examples?
Not exactly. The culture bit is very interesting because everybody has a different culture. Remember, when we're doing the initiating the business, we need to understand what the values of the organization is. I do not have a ready example. I could look around and maybe I could post that example across to the person who asked. Hello?
Once again, thank you, Winifred, for this excellent and informative presentation. And I want to thank all the attendees as well who have joined us today. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. Please be informed that this webinar is recorded and we will upload in our official YouTube channel and in our website, pecb.com. Also, we will upload the slides in our SlideShare account where you can view the slides as well. Goodbye, everyone, and I wish you all a good day.
Thank you, Rita. Goodbye.